Hi everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Maddie and I'm a senior. So I'm just going to tell you guys a little bit about my life and what I've learned through it. So, probably similarly to a lot of you, I grew up in a suburban Christian house with a kind mom, a wise dad, and two sweet older brothers. That's probably doesn't apply to me, but the suburban part does. Anyways, I was raised in a house that was full of love. And I never questioned that because I never had a reason to. But I also remember when I first felt the sadness. I was 11 and I was in 6th grade, and it started because the boys on the bus were a little mean to me. But it turned into a lot more than that, and I remember thinking, why am I so sad? Because I have no reason to be sad. I have an amazing life, I have an amazing family. There's no reason for this. So I pushed it aside and I ignored it and I pretended it wasn't there. Because I didn't want to feel weak and I didn't want to feel little. It carried on for quite a few years, and I kind of reached a place where I was pretty much helpless. And I hid it pretty well usually, but sometimes not so well. And I remember one time really clearly, I was visiting Cleveland, which is where my dad's side of the family lives. And I was at my aunt's lake house, and I was sitting in her family room with my cousin Sarah. And she was sitting on a different couch, and I was sitting on one. And I remember I was really sad, and I just wanted to go home. And I was trying to hold all my emotions inside, but I just couldn't. And my hands were fists, and I was just sitting on the couch. And I remember looking up and making eye contact with Sarah, and her eyes were full of tears. And the reason behind that is because Sarah meant a lot to me. When I was little, she would come in the summers to stay with us, and she would help my mom, because 3 kids is a lot of work. And as I grew up, every single time we would go to Cleveland, I would ask, when do I get to see Sarah? When do I get to see Sarah? When do I get to see Sarah? And then in elementary school, when they ask you who your idol is or who your hero is, time after time, it was Sarah. So when I was sitting in this room with her and she was looking at me and I could see the tears in her eyes, I knew that she understood. And she asked me, she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, I get a little sad sometimes. Other than that, pretty good. And she looked at me and she said, "I get sad too, and I feel it. And it's okay, it's not a bad thing, and you're not alone in it." She was the first person that I really found that I could confide in and that understood exactly what I was going through. She was a safe place for me time after time, and it was nice to tell her. But at the time, what I didn't know was that Sarah was recently released from rehab, not only for depression, but also for drug addiction. She came in and out of our lives a little bit, and it was interesting, and I never really knew why. But eventually I found out, and it obviously was not. It wasn't a good thing for me, and it made me upset. But so, after that experience, the summer of 2016, my mom and I, and my Aunt Carol and Sarah, we went to Panera. And I remember it so clearly. We just sat and we caught up and we just talked, and it was great. And after that, Sarah had just gotten a new puppy, so we went to my aunt's house and we played with her in the grass, and it was sweet. And I can so vividly remember my dad walking out of my aunt's house saying, "Grab your backpacks, it's time to go, we gotta head home." So I threw my backpack on, I hugged my aunt and uncle, and I hugged Sarah, and I said, "I'll see you at Thanksgiving." And I got in the car and I drove back to Cincinnati. Little did I know that that was the last time that I would ever see Sarah. On October 14th of 2016, Sarah died of a heroin overdose. I was a sophomore, and I didn't know what to do with it. I remember I was in my last bell, and the bell rang, and my mom called me right away and said, "I'm outside of Theater Commons. I'm sitting in my car, and I need you to come out here and sit with me." And I said, "Okay, that's really weird, but I'll go." And I went, and I sat in her car, and she told me, and I looked straight ahead, and all I said was, "Okay, okay." And I got out of the car, and I was supposed to cheer at a football game that night, and I went. And I ignored it, and I ignored it, and I ignored it. And I truly cannot tell you how I got through that period of time, because I have never felt so alone in the depths of my feelings and everything. And I reached a point where I just didn't really care about anything. I had bad thoughts. I had all these different things that I knew were wrong, but I just didn't care anymore. And in the midst of all of that, I found myself wondering, where is this God that I grew up knowing? Where is he? Because if he was here, Sarah would be too. But week after week after week, I taught Sunday school for first graders, and I worked at my church nursery. And I was surrounded by God that I didn't know and that I couldn't feel. It reached a point where I seriously considered following through with my suicidal thoughts. And I was admitted into the Leonard Center of Hope for about a week. And when I was in there, the morning after I was admitted, I can watch it like a movie. I walked down the hallway, and there was a nurse at the end wearing blue scrubs, and her back was to me. And she turned around, and I saw a familiar face. Her name was Annie. She goes to my church, and I watched her kids in the nursery weekly. And her younger sister used to babysit me, and here she was in front of me in a mental hospital. And I was absolutely petrified. All I could think was, there's nothing I'll be able to do after this. I can't babysit, and I won't be able to pick anything up. Everything's ruined. But she pulled me aside later, and she said, I know that you know who I am, and I know who you are. And she said, I'm not going to tell anyone that you are here. This is confidential. This is a safe place for you to grow and to learn. And she told me, she said, I want you to know that you are more than your emotions and what they tell you you are. But at the end of that, all I heard was, I'm not going to tell anyone. And I was released from the Leonard Center with depression and anxiety, just like when I went in. But I was also released with coping skills, a dire need for change, and the understanding that even when I didn't see that people were there with me, they were. I want you to know that I still get sad, and I'm not like entirely cured or anything. I've just learned to find God in other people. There's the story of the paralyzed man, which I'm sure all of you know, but I'm going to point something out that hopefully you haven't noticed before. So in the story of the paralyzed man, his friends carried him on a mat to Jesus where they hear he's healing people. And they try to get him, but it's too crowded. The room where Jesus is too crowded. So they have to go up, and they lower their friend through the roof into right in front of the feet of Jesus. And he says, your faith has made you well. Pick up your mat and go home. What's important about that is it wasn't the faith of the paralyzed man, it was the faith of his friends. And he was healed through that. You need to learn to let others carry you, because I didn't learn, and it was hard. But if you have people around you who are willing to help you, they will carry you. I promise that. And if you don't find friends that will do that for you, come find me. Come find one of your teachers, because they all want to be here for you. When I was little, my mom used to read Footprints in the Sand to us, so I'm going to read it to you guys. One night, a man had a dream. He dreamed he was walking along the beach with the Lord. Across the sky flashed scenes from his life. For each scene, he noticed two sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to him and the other belonging to the Lord. When the last scene of his life flashed before him, he looked back at the footprints in the sand, and he noticed that many times along the path of his life, there was only one set of footprints. He also noticed that it happened in the very lowest and saddest times in his life. This really bothered him, and he questioned the Lord about it. Lord, you said once I decided to follow you, you would walk with me all the way, but I've noticed that during the times that were most troublesome in my life, there was only one set of footprints. I don't understand why you would leave me. And the Lord replied, my precious child, I love you, and I would never leave you. During the times of trial, when you see one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. Maybe you don't see God, and maybe you don't feel him in your life. And maybe the encouragement comes from your friends or a teacher or someone else, and that's okay. What's important is that he is working through the people around you, and that even when you can't see it, he is present. God will carry you, and I promise you that. We want to feel God, and when we don't feel him, we dismiss him, because he doesn't fulfill what we need. And it's so important to know that God is so much more than a feeling. I've learned to look for God in others, because when you can't feel God, someone else here can. Let them carry you. I don't know what you're going through, but hear me when I say this. You are more than your feelings and what they have told you you are. And no matter how alone you feel, you are surrounded by people who care about you. And if you let them, they will carry you. And for that, we thank God.